Okay, we're just getting past 1 minute past the hour, so we will start now. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bruno Sisodia. I'm one of the co-chairs of the NNPCF, and today's session is very much in response to feedback we've had from our members, parent carer forums, local parent carer forums, around frankly, a little bit of confusion about the changes that are happening at the moment in the support offer for local areas. So we've got today's webinar will actually cover off on the changes that have been happening in the support that local areas, so that's local authorities, health providers and commissioners will be getting to deliver SEND services after the end of the Delivering Better Outcomes Together program, the DBOT program that many of you will have been aware of. So we're really lucky today in that we've been joined by several people from the Department for Education to talk through the new and ongoing support program. So today we have Fiona Nzegwu, who is the Deputy Director of SEND Improvement and Operations. We also have Susie Powell, who is the Deputy Director of SEND Policy. And we've also been joined by Ellie, who is the lead for Alternative Provision Reform and Strategy. So without any further ado, what I'll do is I'll hand over to Fiona, who's going to frame today's session for us. And then I think we're going to hear from Fiona, Susie and Ellie throughout the next hour. Oh, I should probably say that we will be taking some questions and we'll try and take pauses at the right stages in these in the session to take your questions. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to pick them up and put them to our presenters at the right point. So Fiona, over to you.
Thanks, Marina, and good afternoon to everybody, and just thank you for giving us this time to talk to you. I do think it would be helpful if we will spend some time sort of setting out our suite of support and
Heather, could you go on mute? Thank you.
Real life. And part of the reason that I've not come here alone is because that is very much what we do have. We have a suite of support that we offer and are working with partners to offer, not just to local areas, local authorities, but also to parents and carers and children and young people with SEND. So that's why I have my colleagues on the call, so you can get an understanding of that whole comprehensive, we hope and intend, suite of support that's being delivered and facilitated by the department. I think just wanted to just set a little bit of context, as Maruna has set out. Of course, we're very aware that we've identified, we know there are challenges in the system, and that is why now we have launched the consultation for the SEND and AP Green Paper. But as we all know, reforms and legislation do take time post-consultation, and we're very clear in the department that we need to do something, continue to do something and build on the things that we're doing now. And so that's what we want to talk to you about. So this is very much about what we're doing in the immediate, short and medium term, whilst we wait and work through those reforms that are going to take us through longer term. It's very much about what are we putting into the system and how are we building up the system so that that framework exists and is better able then to take on the reforms that are coming on further down the line. So I just think it's just really important that we sort of start from that point of view. So things will change going forward. There are some things that we'll be delivering now that will grow or change, but it is very much about that seamless. We don't want breaks in support, and we don't want breaks in how we deliver services, or local areas, regions, etc., deliver services to you. We want to keep building and improving on that. So that's the starting point. So you will know that a lot of money has been recently invested in SEND through our recent spending review, and in line with the launch of that, as I said, Green Paper consultation. And if possible, we can categorise that into what we're delivering for parents and carers and children and young people with SEND, and my colleague Susie Powell will talk a little bit more about that. And then I will go into a little bit more detail about the actual system support. So as Maruma has referred, we had delivering better outcomes before. That contract or that consortium is no longer taking forward our targeted support work, but that doesn't mean that's not happening. And so I'll talk through the sort of system support that we have in a bit more detail after Susie. And then, as we say, we've got Ellie on the call as well, who can talk to you about the work that we're doing in alternative provision, because that's all parts and parcel. So we're very much more than some of our parts. And also I have a colleague, Helen Nix, on the call. Helen is from the SEND review, so the SEND and AP Green Paper team. We do have separate consultation events around the SEND and AP Green Paper, but just in case there's anything that we want to touch on, Helen is here to listen and to take some of that forward, and or to answer any immediate questions you have if that's needed. So as I say, this is very much a team effort, because that's how we're pulling all this support together. So I'm going to hand over to Susie to start us off first. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Fiona, and thanks to all of you for having us here today. As Fiona said, I'll kind of quickly go, well, not quickly, I'll go through the different elements of the support package that we've got for children, young people and their families. There are, so a lot of this sort of support that we've had over the past few years is continuing, but I'll go through sort of line by line just so it's super clear. So firstly, I think it's worth mentioning, and it's quite relevant given the form that we've got here. So we're able to confirm this week that funding to a consortium of charities to empower children and young people and their parents was confirmed. So we confirmed that money, and there are different elements to that. So part of that is the grant funding to each PCF. So we're able to confirm this week that grant funding of I think it's 17,500 to each PCF is going ahead. So that's now confirmed. I know that was something that was concerning PCFs and their membership a couple of months ago. So it's good that we're able to confirm that. There's also additional funding that's going to support and training for the forums and young people's participation groups. And that includes the FLARE group that many of you may know about. The second element to talk through on it is to the provision of information, advice and support, and all of that being impartial. So this is partly about funding the national helpline that Contact run that many of you know about. And it's also in providing training and development to local SENDIAS services that are in each local area. So that's that used to be under fairly lots of different arrangements, but that's all been brought together in one contract now, which we call participation. And as I say, that's all been confirmed this week, which we're really pleased about. The second thing that I want to mention was kind of the support for those families most in need. So many of you know about the scheme that we support, providing grants to families who are really, really in need, offering things like washing machines, technology, short breaks. We're supporting that again this year, so there's 27 million going towards that in this financial year. There are some new things that I just wanted to touch on as well. So some of you may have seen that we're able to secure 30 million of funding over the course of the next 3 years to fund 10,000 respite places. This is like brand new funding, and we're really, really delighted to get it in the spending room in the autumn. And the aim of this is to really relieve the pressure on those families that need it most. Now, we should be able to say a bit more about where the funding is going in terms of the different local authorities that we're supporting to provide these services over the course of this year. We should be able to get that information out in the next couple of weeks. So watch this space on that one. And the final thing I wanted to mention, because I know it's close to everyone's hearts, is on preparation for adulthood. So for many, many years, we've had a supported internship programme. We knew from all of our research and feedback that this kind of provides really good outcomes for young people as they're getting over 20 towards 25. And so we invested some additional funding in that. So we've got 18 million extra, and we're hoping to double the number of supported internships. So we're working through the detail of that now, and that's due to launch in the autumn. So that is the sort of the lines of things that I wanted to cover, just to give clarity on what is sort of being funded from the department. As I say, there's not a huge variation between what we did last year and what we're doing in this year on this front, but I'm more than happy to take questions on all of those elements. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. I will pause there because there's a few questions and a few bits and pieces of clarification that people have asked for in the chat. So maybe if I can just go through that. Just to confirm that kids are a part of the participation contract, and they will be providing the local children and young people's participation work. Is that correct? Yes, that's great. So that's a yes there from Susie. We've been asked if you could provide a little bit more detail around the IAS support package, please, as to what kind of support is being offered to SENDIAS services, and also whether that would be made available to could parent carer forums access some of that training and support as well.
Great, thanks, Marina, and thanks for the questions in the chat. And I think there was another question chat about whether we can write this down and send it out, which we absolutely can. And I'm sure Fiona agrees as well that we can make that really clear and send it out to everybody. On the IAS support package, so the significant part of it is we've got a team that go around providing specific training events for SENDIAS colleagues. Sort of going around the country. So that's the bulk of the support package that we offer, as well as sort of funding to actually fund the sort of the mechanics of those services.
Thank you. And just a couple of quick points of clarification. So Tracy, that was 18 million, not 8 million additional for supported internships, and Susie, you mentioned doubling the number of supported internships. Could you give us a number there as to how many we're aiming to get to?
Aiming to get to 4,500 from 2,250.
Great. And if you could just say a little bit more about the short breaks funding as to how that's going to be distributed and allocated both to local authorities, and how we envisage that being used within local authority areas as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see I've caused a bit of confusion in the chat on different things that I've called short breaks. So there are two separate things. There's a family in need funding. Yes, that is the family fund. Then separately, we've got the short breaks funding, which is the Respite Innovation Fund. Now that, as I said, it's 30 million over 3 years. In this financial year is 10 million. We had a bidding process over February, and we got a huge number of bids, which was brilliant. We're really, really pleased with that, and some fantastic examples of innovation. And even though lots of the bids were led by local authorities, they all very much involve sort of all the other local services. And we explicitly, one of the criteria was, how are you involving health services? And we worked very closely with NHS England when we were sort of looking at all of the bids that came in. There are 7 that we are looking to allocate grants to, and we haven't got those all confirmed yet, so I can't name the specific local authorities, but we should be able to in the next week or so. We've only got 3 of them properly confirmed out of the 7, but there are 7 of them. And they range from things, I mean, the sort of the most innovative one we've had has been a bus, which is in quite a rural local authority, and it's a bus that will be going around sort of providing services to families in need. So there's a real range in sort of the level of innovation and kind of interesting different ways that people are coming at it. But I'll make sure that we get the details of those 7 local authorities coming through to all of you once we've confirmed it.
Thanks, Susie. And just a general comment. I think apologies that we actually haven't got slides today, but I think as we go through the presentations or the content that our colleagues at the DFE are going to be sharing, I'm sure it will become obvious that a lot of the stuff that you're hearing at the moment is very hot off the press. And so some of the material supporting it isn't there at this point in time, but I like just to share with you, we do actually have pre-meets ahead of these things, and one of the things I asked Fiona and colleagues for was exactly those slides. I knew that we want that clarity. So we'll endeavour to get those, a few slides out to you once things are battened down a little bit more, and we can share some more of the details. Okay, Fiona, back to you. Susie, was there anything else from you at this point, or should I pass back to Fiona?
Pass back to Fiona. That's great. Thank you very much, and for your questions.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Marina. So absolutely, and what I think what will be helpful, as Marina has set out, is we can come together and just maybe do a couple of slides that just set everything out in a sort of clear and linear way, so that you can see A, how they all fit together, but B, that sort of full package. So I will talk through the sort of SEND system improvement suite of support that we have. So we've talked about or referenced before the DBOT contract. We have retendered, so we're not necessarily working with DBOT in that same way, but I think what we do have is a really comprehensive package of targeted performance improvement that will be delivered by a consortium. And so that is, it's not ending, it's going to be different and it's going to expand. So within that targeted performance contract, we will be offering support for many of the things that you had before and some additional. So we will definitely be looking at working with partners in local areas to consider how best that they deliver their SEND strategy, develop and deliver a SEND strategy. There'll be areas that need support on co-production, development of co-production charters. Those will still be happening. We'll be looking at joint commissioning, development of data dashboards and assessment of said data, pathway diagnostics. So I don't want to go through line by line all the list, but again, as I say, many of the things that were there before and some add-ons. So we'll be doing more work on the leadership front with local areas, not just with that the sort of directors of children's services and or SEND leads, but also with members within councils as well, so that they understand their roles and responsibilities in relation to children's services and SEND more specifically. We'll be looking at also preparation for adulthood as part of this as well. We'll be looking at the local offer and making sure that those local offers are fit for purpose in terms of their presentation. And also there'll be elements of graduated response support, understanding EHC processes, and also bringing in social care and education in a more sort of strategic and comprehensive way. So we have that multidisciplinary approach. So a real suite of support that targeted contract and our delivery partners will be offering. Something new in that space also is we're really live to and want to understand what effective practice is out there. We know there is some, much of it particularly developed during the pandemic when things had to be done differently. And so we want to bring that together. So we'll also be working with research, a research body, university body, looking at how we capture and bring together that effective practices from across local areas. So that can be shared, disseminated, and we can develop some resources and tools in relation to those as well. So that's something new and I think positive to add to that targeted consortium offer. The other thing that we will continue and build on is our work with financial advisors, practice advisors. Many of you will be familiar with those. They work with the local, the national PCF. They also work with the regional PCS. What we want to do there is build that team around local areas where we're working, local authorities that we're working with, and the advisors will be working quite comprehensively with those as well, not just those areas that have written statements of action and or accelerated progress plans, but also moving into the new programme that I think many of you will have heard of. Those 55 local authorities that we'll be working with through the Delivering Better Value programme. This is a programme where we're going to not just look at practice, ways we can improve practice, but also looking at the financial sustainability in those local authorities. So this is a programme that will work with the local authorities where they have DSG deficits, so dedicated support grant deficits, that aren't as significant as some of the local authorities where you will be familiar with a programme called Safety Valve. So local authorities that have very high and significant deficits, that programme will continue and grow. But this, in a sense, is a programme that will work with those local authorities just below those Safety Valve authorities. And look across the board at what transformation system changes need to be put in place so that we have both financial and practice improvements, so that the offer and experience of children and young people is improved. Alongside that, therefore, we will also engage financial advisors to sit alongside our practice advisors so that we have that full team around local authorities. In addition, we'll also be working at a more sector regional level. So we will still have regional coordinators in some areas and are working with our dedicated health colleagues, medical officers, etc. We will work with our regional colleagues alongside children's social care to make sure that the SEND is being thought of at a regional level. There are some issues that sit within a region that if we can actually put support in and invest to address those issues at a regional level so that it benefits all the local authorities, or at least clusters of local authorities in that space, and that's all the better, rather than just doing everything on an individual basis. And additionally, we're also taking forward a programme of work which we're calling sort of sector-led improvement partners. This is where, building on the what works effective practice sharing element of our work, we're looking to work with some local areas, local authorities, for example, Islington, Bedford, Warrington, and Kensington and Chelsea, so the Byborough, who actually we might partner with a particular local authority to again work with them to take forward some elements of their practice that has worked quite effectively. The way we'll go about deciding which local authority or which local area needs what is very much through a use of a diagnostic approach. We have a whole suite of data that we use publicly available in the main, but also just how we assess that data to understand and work with a local area to determine what the need is. And we will work with parent carer forums on that basis. So it's a co-produced diagnostic and assessment and understanding of what the issues are in an area, so that we can then devise an improvement plan, so to speak, and work consistently to take that improvement plan forward. So it is very much a strategic approach that we hope to take forward. And as I said before, that's to build on and allow those areas to be ready to take on board the reforms that are coming through from the SEND and AP Green Paper. We'll continue to work very closely with NHS England, our health colleagues, because they're part of that system. And so in any conversation we're having about what's needed in an area, they will be involved. We'll also continue to work with Ofsted, not just because of the inspection and responding to the inspection, but also because we're working with them to develop a new inspection framework, which we think will, in a sense, respond better to some of the concerns, issues that have been raised by parents and carers in particular, about trying to understand what the experience of your experiences of the system, and therefore what we need to hold local areas to account, not just local authorities, but the rest of the system to account on, so that experience is improved. So I hope I haven't gone through that too quickly, but I hope that's helpful and explains, as I say, that the fact that it's not just things that we were doing before, but actually we've added to that and expanded. So hopefully it gives you a full suite of support.
Thank you, Fiona. That's a very a canter through the new range of support. I think, you know, there are some comments in the chat, but before we go there, perhaps I could just ask you to sort of add a little bit more colour and detail on a couple of those areas that you mentioned. So just to help forms a process to understand. So the SEND practice advisors are essentially the SEND regional advisors that are Andre's team.
Andre's team, they work with Andre. I think that they are, but yes, they're the advisors, you know. So many of you probably know, say, Pat in the West Midlands, Brian, Gail, another person, Liz Flaherty. So yes, and we have some
it's that team.
Yes, it's that group of people. Yeah, absolutely.
Question, you know, will they be working with parent carer forums? And I think the answer to that is yes.
Absolutely, and I did say this, and if it didn't come across clearly enough, when we're talking about looking and understanding what the need is and improvement wise in a local area, we want to do that in a co-designed and co-produced way. So that very much will involve parent carer forums. It will involve working with schools. It will involve working with health colleagues, as well as obviously your sort of assistant director or a SEND lead in a local authority, as well as the director of children's services. It's right across because it needs to be strategic. So yeah, absolutely.
There's been a lot of concern from parents and parent care reforms around the two sort of segments you mentioned in the middle there, items 3 and 4 on your list, which were the delivering better value for in SEND, and also the SEND financial advisors. Okay. There is genuine fear out there that the agenda that this group for those two programs is essentially cost cutting, and it's treasure led. What can you say about what the objectives of those programs are? Because those are the comments that we've had.
And that's fair, and it's not about cost cutting. It really isn't. What we want to do is most local authorities are working in under pressure and in very challenging circumstances. The pandemic has just exacerbated that. This isn't something that just started recently. What we're looking to do is actually, and I keep using the term strategic, but it really is about that. It's about looking at that in a sense, journey mapping in a local area and understanding what are the drivers of increased demand in an area. And when I say demand, I mean in terms of if we have an increase in the number of requests for assessments for EHCPs, where is that coming from? What is driving that, and how can we work to support that better? And what you often find in a local authority, for example, is a local authority will be looking to meet that increased referral, increased need for assessment, and therefore other things aren't being delivered in the way that everybody needs and wants them to be. So what we're looking at here is financial advisors coming and literally looking at the financial situation and making sure that the resource allocation is being done in the best and most effective way. So it's not about coming in to slash, it's about coming in to make sure that the resources are available and working most effectively. And that will sit alongside practice. If you're not getting your practice right, if the practice isn't being delivered in quite the right way, then that may have an impact on your resource allocation, as in funding allocation. So we just want to really understand the whole picture and then think about how we manage that, how we work to balance that so that you've got an effective and efficient support system, a SEND system in place that better meets the needs of parents and carers. So it isn't about actually we've got a target for this or we've got a target for that. It's about how do we best meet need at the right time in the right way.
And I think that this is thank you for that explanation. I think that what we will no doubt do is continue to feed back to you as to how this stuff is landing, the sorts of feedback we're getting from parent care reforms and others on this. In the sense that feedback loop I think is going to be really important for that for how that particular part of the program and the rest of it develops. Just linked to the money, and I wouldn't necessarily expect you and Susie to have the answer to this, but there's increasing. It's in the chat, but there's also increasing concern out there around essentially just the affordability of core positions, such as for families, such as things like teaching assistants and personal assistants, and be able to find people who are willing to do the work, what is often very demanding work, very difficult work, on the very, very low pay rates that are available. So it is linked to the money, because, and especially at the moment, this is heightened at the minute and with the cost of living crisis at the moment, and we are hearing across the board through parent care reforms of what was a difficult job to recruit into already is becoming increasingly difficult, and perhaps even to the point of being impossible and unsustainable. Is there anything in the, are those? We are all aware that that Rishi Sunak does not, listen directly to both you and Susie. But if you can say what representations DFE is making on those topics to Treasury to make that case for additional funding, I think that would be really helpful.
Susie, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, thanks, Bruno, and thanks for all the comments in the chat. It's a message that we're consistently hearing, and it's a message that we are putting through to our colleagues that lead on workforce in DFE. So that's the kind of the feedback loop that sort of we're making sure is happening inside the department. And I mean, we heard a lot of this and are continuing to hear a lot about this throughout the SEND review consultation as well. And what we're hearing quite explicitly is that it's across the range of TAs and personal assistants, but also sort of specialist staff where there are gaps, real gaps sort of popping up. We are working with DHSC on that. You'd have seen in the review there's a commitment to actually work on sort of specialist staff, but when it comes to the sort of the specific sort of education related ones, that's something that we're doing internally within DFE with our workforce colleagues.
There's no silver bullet, and you're not, and there isn't an open checkbook around this stuff. But I think it's important that those who make those sort of workforce funding allocations, those workforce wage decisions, understand the impact that this is having. So thank you for that. Just picking up on a couple of points around sort of therapy services and long waits. That's something that we did a survey ahead of our conference. We asked parent care reforms what their current biggest issues were, and overwhelmingly the biggest issue was the long waits for community-based health services at the moment. Now, just to give you some context for that, we have picked up on that, and I think if I remember rightly, it's the 7th of June. We have Lorraine Mulroney from the SEND team at the Department for at NHS England coming to speak to parent care reforms through a webinar about what NHS England are doing around those long wait times and the impossible situation that many families find themselves in waiting for all sorts of community-based health services. But is there anything you can say to that around the join up, either Susie or Fiona, around the join up between the DFE and NHS England around the impact that's having on SEND provision locally?
I mean, I can touch on that and then hand over to, and we work very closely with NHS England and Lorraine Mulroney in particular. She is, part and parcel of when we're talking about engaging with a local authority, engaging with a local area. Lorraine is part and parcel of that, and her team are part and parcel of that conversation. So we do try and bring that together because it is all part of this system. I think in terms of those long waits, we are very live to that. I know that they and we have sort of worked very closely to make sure we've put out communications about people being back in work and the need for the workforce input there. And I think that's something that does feed into, therefore, the difficulties around timeliness, around assessments, etc. So it's something that is reflected in the Green Paper in terms of how we want to and need to engage with DHSC in particular, so around that sort of workforce and the need for that community practice and looking through the ICS as well. And I think there's something about holding those areas to account as well going forward, which is something that often falls to the local authority, and we want to make sure that accountability is held across the piece. So it is just to provide that reassurance that A, we are live to it, B, we recognise it is a significant issue, and we are working as best we can to help turn that around with our colleagues in NHS England. I don't know, Susie, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I don't have much to add to that, and I think that was a really, really comprehensive summary. I think the only thing that I would mention on top of that is we're also incredibly conscious that the reforms that are being undertaken in health could have an impact on children and young people with SEND and their families. And the other thing that we've really been prioritising over the past few months with DHSC and NHS England is that by moving to a different system locally in health, you don't end up exacerbating the issues that we've already got and creating even bigger gaps and even bigger issues for children and young people with SEND. So that's the only thing that I'd add on top of what Fiona said, that's been a real focus for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody, please look out for that webinar on the, as I said, from my memory, which is not what it used to be. It is the 7th of June, but we've fed that directly back to NHS England, and they are trying to tackle it. They tell us, but we thought it was useful for them to come and talk directly to parent care reforms and hear your feedback around this stuff. Just on the Fiona, you mentioned accountability there, and that's really helpful because actually there's been a couple of comments in the questions in the chat around accountability. Can you say a little bit more about the continuation or what is happening next in the when it comes to local area inspections? So that's both the completion of the current round of inspections and revisits, and also what's happening with regards to the next round of inspections.
Sure, absolutely. And yes, because accountability is key, and we don't want to lose that accountability, and we don't want to lose oversight of what's happening in local areas as well. So yes, the current framework, the timing between the current framework and the launching of the new framework in 2023, there is a period, an interim period, so to speak, but that doesn't mean that we won't have eyes on local areas. We will continue to work with those where they've been asked to produce a written statement of action and or an APP. That work will continue. Advisors will still engage, and we will continue to monitor their progress and have those review meetings. That will not stop. Revisits will continue as well, and we are looking at where we have how we might work more intensively and potentially in an interventionist manner in those areas where we have concerns, either those that are raised and or through our sort of assessment and understanding of the data, we think that there is need for a conversation, even if there hasn't been a direct inspection. So all of that will continue in the interim until the new framework comes into play. What we're working with Ofsted and CQC, because we must remember it is Ofsted and CQC. We're working with them to start to address some of the concerns, issues, things that were raised in relation to this current regime. So that is about, and it's reflected in the Green Paper as well, that is about holding all elements of the system to account. So how can we better do that before the legislation, etc., from the Green Paper comes into play? Also that better understanding, as I said before, about the experience of the child or young person, the experience of the parent and carer, the impact, positive and or in some cases sadly negative, of leadership within a local area. How therefore do we hold that leadership to account but more effectively through this new inspection framework? So these are all the things that we want to take forward. We also want to better understand how we can articulate the outcome of that inspection such that it isn't a sort of minefield, or it's difficult for people to understand therefore what the development areas are in a particular local area, and also how they're going to be progressed. And I think that's something that I hope parents and carers would welcome. So that real understanding of there are things that need to be developed, but there are strengths in a particular area, and the time frame around what we're planning to do and how we're planning to do that. So these are all things that we want to make more clear, have better clarity on in the new framework, so that it's not something that is difficult for people to navigate and understand.
Thank you, Fiona. Just to, if I might do, just take there's two more points that have come out that I want to put to you and Susie before I pass over to Ellie, who's been very patiently waiting. The first is, it's a really important point, which is there is a perception, the message is going out there that the delivering better value in SEND, the DBVS program, I get it, I'm getting my acronyms muddled, is actually about, one of the key deliverables there is very crudely targeting a reduction in the number of EHCPs.
Okay.
Can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. And I think it's important that I do clarify this. So we did contract a consortium to work with us to deliver a diagnostic framework. So that framework looks at a variety of data points. We wanted to bring together data that would give us a better understanding of what's happening in a local area. So, the number of EHCPs, the level of referrals, the timeliness, all of that data, much of which is in the public domain. But we also then wanted to be able to think, how do we measure and assess that sort of risk levels and bring in other information from local authorities send surveys, information from parent carers and other organisations working in a particular area, so that we get a comprehensive assessment of what's going on in that area in relation to delivery of services. And that would sit alongside the inspection outcome. Empower, someone has put that in the side. Empower, the lead member of that consortium. It was a task and finished piece of work. The contract ran from December and is now ended. And it was just to work with us to deliver a framework. And we then will, as in the department, are going to use that baseline framework and add to it as an iterative process. So we'll continue to build and add to that framework going forward. So the work that Empower do separately is not tied directly to this framework, as in we will work with the areas and deliver the diagnostic to help us take forward any work that we're doing. So I hope that clarifies that up. So the DBVS was a task and finished piece of work to support us to develop a framework. The delivering better value, i.e. the work with 55 local authorities, is a completely separate programme, and Empower are not part of the providers that are working with us on that. So I think that's just to sort of separate the two things. We've taken forward an open tender process, and once we have the consortium or the partners that are going to work with us on that, we will let everyone know. But two separate pieces of work, they just happen to both have delivering better value in their titles. So I hope that sort of clarifies that. In terms of that specific point about they are directly and only around reducing the number of EHCPs, that's absolutely not the case. I think it is quite important to understand there are different reasons, and I don't want to diminish this in any way. There are different reasons why a local authority or a local area will have a higher or growing number of EHCPs and or requests for EHCPs. And in the main, what we're working to do here is to just understand how best that local authority can be supported to meet that need in the right way at the right time. And that's what these programs are about. So whether it's about, as I said, resource allocation in the right way, whether it's about making sure that the service at, say, the front door, for example, is fit for purpose, so that assessments are made in a timely fashion and referrals are made to the right areas. That's what we're looking at, which is why we've got practice advisors, financial advisors, delivery support partners, all working around a local area to understand what that need is and how best to meet it. So there isn't it is just about reducing the number of EHCPs, and I hope that comes across clearly.
Okay, thank you. If you just to close out that particular point, that there clearly has been confusion about the role of Empower, and some comments in the sense in the chat, a number of comments that basically Empower's pitch was that we will come in and we will help you reduce your number of EHCPs in a very crude kind of way. That's what families that's not what the DFE asked Empower to do, and we worked with Empower to develop to support us to develop a comprehensive diagnostic framework, which we will take forward and we will deliver with our delivery partners going forward. The last sort of point, there's a couple of comments in the chat that I just wanted you to pick up on. You talked a couple of times around the data, better data, better intelligence, allowing us to target better support. Can you talk a little bit about the data that you're looking to gather and how that will be developed? And in particular, there's quite a few points in the chat around working with parent care forms and working with parents around to understand and get the right sort of data gathered.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it's qualitative and it's quantitative data. So we engage, I mean, as you know, Marina, I engage with you, I engage with Tina, I engage with others, CDC colleagues, etc., to understand the surveys that you conduct, how do we use that to inform our thinking, policy development, delivery, and improvement work. There are as you said, the annual collections that come from local authorities, their assessment of the number of requests, their timeliness around delivery of EHCPs, their review. That's not sort of a formal capture, but we also look at review timeliness, etc., when we work with local authorities. So it is a balance of qualitative and quantitative data, and part of our desire to enrich that is so that we get that full understanding. So it's not just we've had an inspection and we're just taking what's read from there. We're not just looking at an annual return. Actually, can we have more timely returns that come in, if not monthly, at least quarterly, so that we can see trends? And then it allows you to ask that question: why are we seeing an increase here, or why are we seeing a decrease here? Is that right, or is that something that's happening somewhere else that we need to then work with that local authority to address? And it's an iterative process, it's an ongoing conversation. So it's not just that we'll have that conversation in month one with a local area and then we won't come back until inspection takes place and we hear something other. What we want to do is be able to have that ongoing dialogue with areas that we're working with, to just see what those trends and patterns of change are. Hopefully, in many cases, it will be about improvement, but where there are red flags, what do we do to get ahead of crisis, failure, a negative experience as quickly as possible?
Thank you. I'll pause there. A number of us, we can continue to get some comments in the chat, but I think that we're sort of like continuing to explore some of the themes that we've already asked questions around. So I'll move on, if I may, at this point. And Ellie, can I possibly bring you in to talk a little bit about what's happening with AP?
Thanks, Manuel, and thanks, Susie and Fiona. I'm Ellie, and I lead on alternative provision reform strategy, which Manuel mentioned at the beginning. I'm aware that might not be relevant for all groups on the call, but we do know that the majority of children and young people who are supported by or educated in alternative provision schools are identified with special educational needs. And one of the key reforms set out in the Green Paper is for an integrated SEND and alternative provision system. So that's why I'm here today, to sort of head up that is the way we are thinking as a department, and we really want to ensure that the system is holistic and considers all elements of it. At their best, we know that AP schools provide a very specific role in supporting children and young people whose behavioural needs present a barrier to learning, and that can include pupil referral units, AP academies, free schools. It also includes medical and hospital schools, so for those children and young people who are too unwell to attend the mainstream schools. They do, however, have a very distinct role that is different from special schools. And there's just a couple of ongoing projects that we're working on in the alternative provision space that I wanted to mention to you today. So the first and possibly the most exciting is alternative provision task forces. So these are 22 multidisciplinary teams embedded in AP schools. So this is backed by £15 million of funding, and these are specialists across a range of professionals, but usually include things like educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, youth workers, and transition workers for sort of post-16 as well, depending on the school and the local area needs. And they work directly with children and young people in the school, so their support is brought to the school. They work in a multi-agency way that is joined up, work with the teachers, with mainstream schools, and with the local authority, and also their health partners in that area. They are focused on the areas with high rates of serious violence. It's a joint project with the Home Office, but that isn't the only outcome that we're seeking to reduce. It's also about improving attendance, well-being, attainment, feeling included in school, and personal outcomes like that as well. So those were launched on the 1st of November 2021, and are working in schools as we speak. We also have lots of existing good practice in alternative provision. So in the Green Paper, we talk about a pupil referral unit called Chesbrook, which basically is already offering the sort of targeted support in mainstream schools that we want to see every alternative provision school providing. So what they do is, rather than waiting until children reach crisis point and are permanently excluded, or they require a managed move, or off-site direction into an alternative provision school, is they work as soon as the need emerges, with the child, with the parents, and with the school, to build capacity in that mainstream school to meet that child's needs. So that can look like lots of different things depending on what that specific child needs, but the sort of things we expect and Chesbrook are really good at doing are things like teaching regulation, improving peer relationships, coaching, small group work, sessions with teachers and leadership team on whole school behaviour approaches, etc. So this really builds on what the white paper sets out, and I've been in a few consultation events recently, and there seems to be this sense that the green paper and the white paper may not be very consistent, with the focus on behaviour in the white paper and then the focus on inclusion in the green paper, and I really don't think that's true. And if we have got that message wrong, then that is on us, and we really do want to hear it. But to be really clear, I work very closely with the behaviour team, and their strategy was co-produced with our strategy. They are meant to be read in tandem. So a calm, safe, supported whole school approach to behaviour will support all children. And the outreach support that we want AP schools to provide will be there when a whole school behaviour approach isn't sufficient, but it is about continuing to support and educate children to make sure that they feel included and safe and supported at school. A couple of other things that's just worth mentioning that's ongoing in the AP space is the AP free schools. So we announced some funding in the green paper, but in addition to that, there are more than 60 special and AP free schools already underway. So they will be happening over the next few years, and they will be beginning to open. And the final point is on our behaviour and exclusions guidance. So there was a consultation which closed quite recently on our updates to that. So the team are working really hard to respond to that consultation at the moment. So you can expect to see a response to consultation within that 12-week period. And that will also, again, give schools more clarity on how they should use things like managed moods, off-site direction, so that decisions are made in the best interest of children and young people.
Thank you, thank you, Ali, for that overview. Just a little bit of a couple of themes in the chat, if I might pick up the comments you made around the behavioural team, the behavioural agenda versus the support agenda. I think that's, I think that's quite perceptive. If I might be more direct in the sense that I think that there is additional work to do there, because the way that those policies are landing in individual schools and the feedback we're getting, it makes it very clear that the department seems to be pulling schools into different directions, and very often the behavioural agenda is implemented in quite a cruel and crude way, which, if I can surmise, it's basically they're just naughty boys and need to be excluded and need to learn their red lines, and that's consistent feedback that we get from PCS. So that the intent might be there, but the way it's landing isn't how it's being perceived. Just something around children with SEND essentially ending up in AP when everybody recognises it's the wrong place for them. Can you say a little bit more around that?
So firstly, thank you for being direct. Absolutely, that's what we want, and there's no point being anything other than that. So that's definitely something I'll take back and feedback to the behaviour team. And obviously, there are tensions in the system between things like school autonomy. So schools are allowed to set their own personal behaviour approach. So what we might be saying as a department and our position may be different from how individual schools determine what their individual policy looks like, but it should always be calm, safe and supported, and we absolutely do not believe that that if a child is ever permanently excluded, they still have an absolute right to education and support, and that does not go away, and they should be supported and educated and in the place that best meets their needs. On children and young people ending up in AP when that's not the best place for them, yeah, absolutely, that is one of the core problem diagnoses we talk about in the green paper. We know that sometimes in some local areas alternative provision is used when there isn't enough space in special schools, or when there isn't another suitable place to put children and young people, and we are addressing that. I don't want to talk too much about the longer term reforms, but one of the key elements here is our statutory pupil movement framework. So this is also in the white paper. And again, this is why I think it's really helpful to be like, we are on the same page, even if schools aren't necessarily always seeing that, which is we are consulting on introducing a statutory pupil movement framework, which will look at how all pupils move around the school system, including those into and out of alternative provision, because we recognise that there currently isn't enough transparency or oversight in the system, and decisions are not always made in the best interest of the child, but that is absolutely our aim going forward.
Thank you, Ellie. Just more continues in the chat around the behaviour focus. So we've clearly struck a nerve there, and I think that we've and if the people on the chat want to look at some of the things we've posted on our website around the conversations we've had around this, very much all the chats or all the comments in the chat are things that we've fed back to the Department for Education around the way in which the behavioural policies, the behavioural hubs, and a particular point that's made around the Autism in Schools project, the compare and contrast between the two is something that we've made very emphatically to DFE. I'm really conscious of time, so what I might well do is just bring it back to Fiona, if I may. And I think that if we might, there was a really good comment in. So we've talked almost very hypothetically about around what the new framework's going to look like, the support framework's going to look like, and how we envisage it working. There was a specific question put in the chat which I thought was excellent, actually, that I might put to you. So how would this framework support those children from in a local authority whose where the year 6 pupils with EHCPs have not yet been informed of their places in year 7? So we've got a lot of families with that anxiety. Can you talk through how this framework might address that sort of scenario, stop that sort of scenario happening in the future?
So I think this is Max's question, Max Bassett. So thank you for that question. I was actually looking at that and I was thinking, yeah, there's sort of something practical. So it depends on which local authority is, and I say that not to avoid the answer, to avoid the question, but if we are working with that local authority already, for example, if they have a written statement of action or they have an APP, or they are one of the 55 local authorities that would be on the DBV programme, then we would be looking at all this data, and we would it's one of those things where you take that data in and you look at certain metrics, one of which is how are you doing with transition, how are you doing in terms of reviews, etc. So we would be live to this and we would have that conversation of what is the blocker, and therefore what support do we need to put in place to address that issue. So it'd be very, very direct. However, if we weren't working, and we will be working with at least if by the time we sort of work through safety valve, delivering better value, targeted support, etc., we'll be probably working with over 100 local authorities directly through all those programs, but that there will be some that we're not actively working with. However, our advisors, our case leads, our case contacts within the department, and also schools colleagues, other colleagues, because we'll all work very closely together, will be able to pass on information to us, and or it may come from a parent carer forum through yourself, Maroon, and Altina, via region, for example, and we can take that information and we can have that conversation with the local authority if we're not already working with them, and still be able to go in and understand what is the issue there, and therefore what, if any, support we can put in. It is something that they're supposed to do, that they're required to do. So if that's not happening, then depending on what support is needed, it may be that we need to escalate that and it becomes an intervention. But there are processes either through all these programs or just because through the fact that we work quite closely with local areas anyway to take forward that data and act on it. the collection of qualitative and quantitative data doesn't always give you the answer, but it gives you the outlier, it gives you an understanding of the changes in practice trends that enable you to ask that question and start to understand what's driving that. And that's exactly what we would do in that situation. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded and helped with the question.
Thank you, and thank you for Max. I think that sometimes it's really nice to ground a lot of the strategic stuff in a particular case study.
Sorry, I was going to say, Maruna and Max, if you want to let us know offline which local authority you're talking about, then please do, and we'll see where we are with that, so we can take that forward.
Our hour has flown by. Really, really rich discussions, and I'd just like to say thank you to Susie, to Fiona, and to Ellie for just your frankness and your honesty about where we are. I think the key thing for us is if you could give us those slides around the pictures around how it all fits together. I think that would be incredibly useful for parent care forums and dispel some of the confusion that there is out there. The chat has been incredibly rich as well. So what we will try and do is capture the chat, and we will share it with the 3 or 4 of you, if we may, because I think there's probably really useful information and intelligence in there. And I'm really apologetic that we haven't managed to get to every single question and every single challenge. But what I tried to do whilst doing it was to pull together the themes and invite Fiona, Ellie, and Susie to speak to some of the key themes that were emerging in the chat. So hopefully managed to do that, get that balance right. So at this point, thank you to everybody who joined. Another thank you to our guests from the DFE. And with that, I will close the call. A recording of this will be available on the DFE, on the contact website as with our webinars. So please do look back at it if you think that's helpful. And thank you again to Fiona, Ellie, and to Susie.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.